This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
Did you listen? We need to listen to this. And quite literally so. No, this is not Valentine's Day episode. It's the World Heart Day, and it's quite a special day for us Indians. Why? Because even though we are a fifth of the world's population, India accounts for 60% of the world's heart disease burden. Do you know we South Asians are genetically more prone to suffer from heart diseases than others in the world? In fact, the rate of heart disease among Indians is double that of the West. And when we talk about heart attacks, they start at a much younger age for us.
In the West, patients get heart attacks on an average at the age of 65. In India, on an average, we see heart diseases around 1 decade earlier.
According to Indian Heart Association, around half of the heart attacks in Indian men occur below the age of 50 years. And 25% of these attacks occur before the person turns 40. This is not to say that Indian women have it any easier.
In India, we realize women death rate for heart disease is twice as that of men, and the prevalence is equal.
And for a heart patient, getting the right doctor is a challenge.
We have all of perhaps 7,000-8,000 interventional cardiologists for a country of 1.4 billion people, where almost 300 million people have the risk of heart disease.
And if you thought the problem is only with our genes and our healthcare system, wait.
On an average, Indian diet has around 10 grams of salt, and the recommendation is close to 4 to 6 grams.
It's Thursday, 29th of September. From the Economic Times, I am your host, Kiran Somvanshi. And today on the World Heart Day, we discuss India's Dil Ki Baat only on the morning brief. In today's episode, I speak to Dr. Nihar Mehta, who is a consultant cardiologist at Jaslok Hospital and a few other hospitals in Mumbai. Mr. Sourabh Agrawal, Senior Vice President, Sales and Marketing at pharma company Lupin, and Mr. Sidharth Srinivasan, CEO of Lupin Digital Health. We'll look into the growing incidences of heart diseases in India, why being fit and exercising is not enough, the latest trends in cardiology, and how can cardiac treatment become more accessible and affordable.
मशहूर सिंगर केके का अचानक निधन हो गया है। बताया जा रहा है कि उनकी मौत हार्ट अटैक की वजह से हुई है।
जानी मानी कार कंपनी BMW इंडिया के मुख्य कार्यकारी अधिकारी यानी CEO रुद्रतेज सिंह का दिल का दौरा पड़ने से निधन हुआ था 20 अप्रैल।
Comedian Raju Srivastava died today in Delhi over a month after he had suffered a cardiac arrest while he was working out in the gym. He was on the treadmill.
Right from celebrities to CEOs, from marathoners to the Aam Aadmi. Younger and apparently fit people dying of heart attacks is no longer a surprise. I spoke to Dr. Mehta about how he sees this situation day in and day out as a cardiologist. Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for joining in. You are welcome to the morning brief.
Thank you so much.
We are having this discussion of the World Heart Day, and we have been seeing increased instances of, growing heart issues in the Indian population, especially among the young, among the apparently healthy people. How do you, as a cardiologist, see the trend?
Well, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of patients who are coming at a very young age with more and more severe heart problems. Indians are more prone to heart problems because we are more prone to the risk factors of the heart problems. Now, what do I mean by this? That India is now the diabetic capital of the world. Every 1 out of 8 or 10 people is suffering from diabetes. And when we think about that, diabetes is the foremost risk factor for heart disease. The second thing is blood pressure. It is even more common than diabetes. In India, close to around 25% of people suffer from high blood pressure in cities, which means 1 out of 4 people suffer from high blood pressure. Additional to that, smoking, stress, obesity, less physical activity. These are all additional risk factors, which, all of us are sort of culprits of. Now, when this whole sort of milieu of risk factors comes in, it comes in at a very early age. And in India, we see something called the prematurity of heart disease. When we talk about heart attacks, they start at a much younger age. Around 50% of the heart attacks we see are below the age of 40, 45. And 25% are below the age of 40, which means that so many of the people who we see in the age of 30, 35, 40 come to us with a massive heart attack. And that is a really astounding demographic, So it's really something to worry about.
But tell me something like exercising or leading an active life, isn't that enough to kind of, control this?
In general, it's really very important to lead a healthy lifestyle, which includes taking care of your health and your diet, making sure you're eating enough fruits, veggies, salads, nuts, cutting down on the red meat, on fried and fatty food, things which are junk food, processed food. And it's also important to make sure that you're not physically inactive. So you may be being thin doesn't mean you're fit. So even a person who is not overweight still needs to exercise and needs to regularly do some kind of aerobic activity for around 30 to 45 minutes a day. Because lack of physical activity itself is a risk factor. Now, having said this, if someone is following all this, then why should they ever suffer from a heart problem? Because there are other risk factors which will come into play. There are some things which are not in our control, like our genetics, our family history. Sometimes we are just prone to getting these blockages. If our parents have had blockages, usually you would get them at a younger age. So when you have a mixture of all these issues, sometimes you can get a heart disease in spite of being healthy. But if you are healthy, the risks of having a heart problem are lower, and the risks of having a severe heart problem are lower.
Right. And tell me something like during COVID, we saw this, and post COVID, how have you seen this? Like, we already are naturally predisposed. So, how does COVID make it worse?
As cardiologists, what we've seen is the amount of people who had COVID who actually died of heart attacks or heart blockages was very high. Patients who had normal hearts landed up having weakness in their heart muscle because of COVID. So a young 30 or 32-year-old would come to the emergency with a heart attack. And the next, after we do the emergency procedure, you realize the next that, oh, they've turned COVID positive because COVID itself led to clots, blockages, thrombosis, a lot of cardiac problems, all the way from clots in the heart to clots in the legs and clots in the lungs. So this was a really big problem during the COVID pandemic. After the COVID recovers, maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months later, people came back with heart problems. The incidence of blockages goes up. The incidence of heart weakness and heart failure goes up. Although this is not a very large number, but we do see a significant amount of people who after COVID have had either acceleration of their pre-existing heart problems or have started developing new heart problems later,
Your grandfather was a cardiologist, a leading cardiologist, and now it's you. If you were to kind of compare your practice now and compare it with what your grandfather's practice was, how have things changed?
My grandfather was a physician and my father was a physician. And, there is a very, very big difference between the way they practiced and the way we practice now. When in my grandfather's era, there was no angiography, there was no angioplasty. When a patient had a heart attack, the treatment was bed rest for 4 to 6 weeks. Lie on the bed and pray to God because all they had was aspirin. Today, a patient comes to the emergency. Within 7 to 10 minutes, they are taken to the cath lab. Within around 60 to 70 minutes, the artery which is blocked is opened up. This is called a PAMI or a primary angioplasty in heart attacks. This whole procedure is done from the hand. So at the end of the procedure, they are ready to sit up. They are having a cup of tea and they say, oh, when can I go home? And this is all within 1 or 2 hours of a massive heart attack. So the face of medicine has changed. I also think one more thing is very different is that the doctors today have to be far more accountable. They have to keep themselves updated really well because, on an average, if you want to keep yourself completely updated, you need to read 16 to 19 articles every single day because that is how much medical literature is coming out. So it is still a uphill task for us as well, but in different perspectives.
So, yeah, things have changed. What are the latest digital mechanisms through which handling and tackling disease is easier now?
I think a very, very important innovations have comes in terms of procedures. So there's been a new innovation called TAVI. I was trained in Budapest for this procedure, and it's basically a procedure by which you go from the leg, reach the heart, and open up your heart valve all via the artery in your leg. And the patient is awake through the procedure. They are talking to you. The entire hardware comes out, and in an hour, the valve is changed. So this is just one. There are innovations in stent technology. There are innovations in pacemaker technologies, which are amazing. Now we have these pacemakers which are the size of a little bullet, and they go and reach in your heart, and that's all you need to maintain your heartbeat.
So, it's a good. I think today being a heart patient is much better than probably 60 years ago. But on this other side, as a cardiologist, where do you feel that there are still unmet needs of the patients?
The first unmet need, especially in India, is the financial aspect of it. Because while we have all these lovely therapies available to us, the finance of medicine sometimes is very hard on patients. Sometimes they don't have enough insurance, they don't have enough pensions, they don't have enough savings. So that is something which really, we need to look into. Our government needs to spend much more money on healthcare, especially to provide healthcare as a service to all taxpayers and all patients who really need it. Because if you need a heart valve which costs 15 to 20 lakhs, you don't want to be in a position to say that, oh, you know what, I can't afford this for my mother, she just has to accept it and die in a couple of years. And I think the second unmet need, which I think is also really important, is the faith that patients have on doctors and the relation that is there between doctors and patients. That is something which adds the heart back into the medicine part of treating patients. And that is a unique feature of India and Indian medicine. And I think that is getting lost in the commercial aspect of medicine. So this gap between patients and doctors in terms of the faith they have, in terms of the relation that doctor and patient builds up, I think is a very important factor which should not get lost when we talk about all these medicine advances. And these are the softer aspects of medicines which are very important.
Indeed. But when talking about the commercial aspect of medicine, one cannot really miss the role of pharma companies in the field of cardiology. The cardiac therapy market in India stands at over 22,000 crore rupees and is growing faster than the overall pharma market. Sourabh and Sidharth from Lupin give us a lowdown. Lupin is among the top 3 pharma companies in the Indian cardiology space. To begin with, I would like to know from you, Sourabh, as part of the pharma industry, how have you seen India's cardiac problem worsening?
Thanks for asking this. In fact, it's an alarming situation. We have an unfortunate situation in India that we have among the highest population of people who are suffering from heart disease. If you look at in the market, it has been growing by a significantly higher proportion to that of the overall pharmaceutical market. So if a market of drugs or pharmaceuticals grow by, say, 10%, then typically heart care products or medicines in that category will grow by 12 to 13%. So it only talks about the way it is spreading. And more younger people getting affected because of heart disease now, which is why the need for care is increasing.
Sidharth, during the pandemic, we have seen the whole trend towards digitalization and people being aware and using all digital means. How digitalization has helped the cardiology therapy?
Overall, I think entire COVID wave accelerated the acceptance of digital in healthcare, right? Before even cardiac, I think where this entire space of digital therapeutics has really taken off is in diabetes. So I think taking a cue from diabetes, we've also tried to explore what can be done in the cardiac space. How can we partner with the cardiologist community? How do we sort of complement their efforts? People are very, very poorly monitored. Even heart patients mostly end up taking readings when they are experiencing some discomfort or when they're actually having some pain. Periodic readings are hardly there with few people. And of course, these are not digitized, right? So even those who conscientiously take their blood pressure every day, note it down in a piece of paper, there is no easy way for people to look at trends. If you could look at a graph on your laptop screen, you would be able to tell how the disease is progressing or how control is being made. And that is something that we believe digital can do quite well. Make it easy for people to take readings and look at trends in a much more holistic way. We're also seeing the devices that are being used for taking these readings becoming more consumer grade, more affordable, and more sort of multifunction. So there are trackers now that also measure blood pressure, right? The first of the devices got approved by the FDA. You have small strips that can actually take a 6 or even a 12 lead ECG sitting at home. So something that used to be used to sort of make a trip to the hospital, pay a good amount of money to take that kind of test can now be done from the comfort of your home. So I think there are multiple roles that digital is already playing. Going forward with more data, I firmly believe that digital will also acquire a predictive power. So build an algorithm and give it enough data to train on, and it will actually be able to give you a heads up in terms of what might happen. And I believe that digital will get there very soon.
So are pharma companies looking at adopting digital and taking it to the market, or is it the doctors demanding, or is it the patients themselves looking around and checking on Amazon and seeing, okay, what is the latest device? Let me try. Like, how does it work?
I think it's a happy coincidence that all of these three things are happening together, right? Pharma companies have been looking at digital for a long time. Firstly, when it comes to supply chain, because pharma companies have some of the most complex supply chain network. Therefore, I think they've always managed that through digital. Like we were discussing, I think the entire COVID wave has increased the acceptance significantly on both the patient and the doctor side. And that's where we are seeing, whether it's pharma companies, whether it's venture funded startups, a lot of folks attempting to do what would have been unthinkable, say 2-3 years back, which is, can we take over a part of your entire treatment routine, or can we add to the current standard of care?
Yes, a bunch of health tech startups such as Tricog Health, Cardiac Design Labs, Monitra Healthcare, Jeeptronics, and Sunfox are using technology to provide easy to use and affordable diagnostic and self monitoring devices in India. This makes me wonder, Sidharth, how digitalization makes healthcare affordable.
I think affordability will always be a theme in a country like India, right? So I think pharma companies have done that consistently in terms of making medication more affordable. Fundamentally, the job of digital is to democratize any sector, in this case, healthcare. In a country like India, where we have all of perhaps 7,000-8,000 interventional cardiologists, for a country of 1.4 billion people, where almost 300 million people have the risk of heart disease, it's extremely important that digital play the role of enhancing or amplifying the reach of each specialist. And with young people, with women especially being at risk, I firmly believe that technology will play a huge role in making it easier for people to sort of check in on themselves, take care of themselves, and know how they're doing at any point.
Right. So coming to Saurabh, just wanted to understand, like, anyway, having a heart problem itself is a pain. How expensive is it to kind of take care of your heart disease?
Preventive is economical, always.
Yes. Eat less food, eat less fatty stuff. Yeah.
So for that, you don't need anything. You just have to follow the classical advice, either what your grandparents have been telling us for many years, or how we have seen our forefathers growing. Second is, if you develop a risk factor, then take care of that well in time. So if you have high blood pressure, which is diagnosed on time, if you have high cholesterol, which is diagnosed in time, and then you take care of that well, it is fairly economical. Expensive if that leads to a heart attack or a heart failure, because that's when you get into a hospital. And hospitalization, overall cost of treatment, cost of stay, loss of days of work, mental trauma, all of it is a humongous cost. And that's where, and when you ask Sidharth about will it be cost effective and affordable, I think digital will play a huge role, because when you are able to manage your disease well early, then you don't land up into a situation of hospitalization again. Rehospitalization cost is way too high. It runs in lakhs. While the cost of treatment through pills, along with that, some of the new age digital therapeutics platforms and services which are available, it significantly reduces the overall cost of treatment. So a typical blood thinner will start from 70 paise to not more than a 10-15 rupee a tablet per day. That's it. That's the cost. So say if you have to take in a month, if you're on a single drug, it will be 30 rupees. If you're on a double drug, monthly will be not more than 250 rupees. So that's the way cost of treatment is in India. Similarly, for blood cholesterol reduction, those products are also in the range of say 8 rupees to 12 rupees to 15 rupees a tablet per day, which is making it extremely cost effective.
Two things I want to know, kind of both on digital and non-digital as well. So Saurabh, to you first, how do you see the patient adherence of medication, especially a chronic one? Like for normal acute one, we know that people just pop a pill and they're fine and they forget about it. When chronic, they can't really forget, but they still forget. How do you see that? How do you see the adoption rates?
Unfortunately, Kiran, I think we have poor discipline when it comes to health. And so it goes for chronic disease. So while everyone understands that these are lifestyle disease, and at best you can do is manage. So you have to manage your lifestyle and you have to take the prescribed medicine timely so that the disease does not progress. Unfortunately, despite of a lot of effort by pharmaceutical companies, public health initiatives, and so on, the adherence rate in India is still poor. And it is not cost which leads to this. It is more behavior, which is creating a barrier here. So typically, if I look at heart disease patient, if somebody suffers a heart attack, you will be surprised to know that even people who suffer from heart attack, post 6 months to 9 months, so many of them stop medicines or drop the medicine which are prescribed to them.
I think the 9-month figure is 65%. So 31 in every 3 people are actually giving up medication because they feel fine.
Imagine you've seen it so closely. Despite of that, people do not take very basic product like blood thinners, cholesterol lowering drugs, the one which leads to chest pain reduction. And they fall back only to lifestyle, which again is not more than 3-4 months. And almost everyone returns to what they were back. And that's the precise reason why in India we have this growing. And it's not just India. I mean, adherence is not a problem just in India. Across the globe, health is not considered to be a good expense, unfortunately. You may be ready to spend on a good restaurant or a movie or entertainment, but probably not as much on health. Therefore, the discipline is poor. And therefore, the efforts which are required have to be much larger. I will give an example that 4 or 5 years back, in fact, we were the first company to launch Anya chatbot. Over a period of time, we are seeing the traffic has gone up multi-folds. We have more than 3 lakh patients interacting on this platform on a weekly basis. In fact, recently, we realized that heart disease in women is increasing. And for that awareness, we have taken Maricom on board to talk about women heart disease prevention. In India, we realize women death rate for heart disease is twice as that of men. So and the prevalence is equal. So as many women as men suffers from heart disease, but the treatment rates are half, and therefore the mortality is double. And therefore, with this campaign called Shakti, Lupin has done a lot of shaping work to make sure that women cardiac disease or heart disease is talked about, and then we at least contribute towards better health for women. And Maricom is helping us spread the awareness. So a whole lot of those initiatives keep happening. The needle is definitely moving, but we are not completely reached where we should be. There is a long journey for us.
Just to Sidharth, the other question. Earlier when we discussed on digital, you mentioned that it helps adherence and adoption. But I'm curious, does it really happen where a person uses a machine and, the fancy of that machine for early days is fine. But then as, months progress, does that machine keep him or her engaged? And, that commitment, the way we have with the drug, with the machine, does it also remain?
So, yeah, I think machines always look fancy on day one, right? And novelty sort of wears off. But I don't think it's about the machine per se. I think one of the reasons why folks lose motivation, especially in something like heart disease, is that there isn't a single metric that is a perfect proxy for your heart health. And therefore, it's very difficult for people to know how well they're doing or how badly they're doing. If you were trying to lose weight, but you couldn't measure yourself on the weighing scale, how long do you think you would do it? Right? You will just stop because you have no clue what's happening. But if I'm able to tell you that, Kiran, you've lost 1 kilo in the last 1 week. And if I'm able to do a little bit of gamification, saying that your friends have lost 1.5 kilos, so maybe you want to accelerate the journey. So digital can play that role of building community, of creating some sort of rewards. So I think the job of digital is essentially to make that journey of improving your heart health or improving your health as interesting as many other things in life, right? One of the companies has made paying credit card bills very fascinating. I really don't see why we can't do that with heart health, right? We can do a much better job.
Yes, we all can do a better job. Right from the healthcare system, by bringing innovation and technology at an affordable price, the government by making doctors, medicines, and insurance universally available, especially to rural India, and of course you and me, by keeping the risk factors at bay, eating right and living an active life. Let me share with you the parting advice that I got from Dr. Mehta. On a closing note, a message from you on this World Heart Day about how to prevent heart diseases. If I really want to prevent, I don't want to go through all this, what should I do?
Wonderful. I'll give you 5 tips, okay, which will help you to prevent heart diseases. And they are all related to the letter S.
Wow.
Number 1 is salt. Keep the salt content in your food down, because salt is directly related to blood pressure and it plays a very big role in adding stress to your heart. India is a salt-favoring country. We love to eat our salt and our salty stuff. On an average, Indian diet has around 10 grams of salt, and the recommendation is close to 4 to 6 grams. So we have a lot of salt in our diet. Cut down on all the excess salt. Number 2 is the S, which is the sugar. So try and keep the sugar content down. And by sugar, I mean the carbohydrates, which will reduce the risk of your obesity, being overweight, diabetes, and even your cholesterols. So the second S is the sugar. The third S is stress. Keep your stress levels down. We are all faced with stress, but we should learn of ways to tackle stress. The fourth S is sleep. Make sure that you're sleeping well. It's important to sleep well and sleep for adequate hours. 7 to 8 hours a day should be important sleep for us, and not sleep which we are sleeping at 2 o'clock and waking up late in the afternoon. It should be sleep before midnight, because that is the most restful sleep. And the last S is smoking. I think smoking is a very, very important preventable risk factor for heart diseases. So if you follow these 5 S's, you should be able to keep your heart, the risk factors for heart disease down. So S, salt, sugar, stress, sleep, and smoking.
So that's it for today. You have been listening to India's Dil Ki Baat with me, Kiran Somvanshi, on the Morning Brief. A big thank you to our guests, Dr. Mehta, Sidharth, and Sourabh, for their amazing insights. And thank you for tuning in to this podcast brought to you by the Team Economic Times. Show producer Sumit Pandey, sound editor Indranil Bhattacharjee, executive producers Anupriya Bahadur and Arijit Burman. We hope you like this episode. Do share it on your social media networks. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. The Morning Brief is now streaming on Amazon Prime Music and JioSaavn, apart from Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. And of course, ET's own audio platform, ET Play. Do tune in to ET Play, our latest platform for all audio content. Have a great week ahead. All clips used in this episode belong to the respective owners. Credits mentioned in the description.